Screen printers, Colin from Ryonet. We're now at the stage where we're actually going to be exposing two of the screens that we were talking about earlier, the ones that we did the EOM testing on, the ones that you watched me coat previously, and I'm going to use everything that we talked about for the films. The only thing I didn't talk about was a little grayscale halftone strip that I did. I did two, 0 to 100%. One of them is at 55 lines per inch, which on a 157, I don't expect to keep the lower end dots, but this is just to show detail and education. The other one is 35 lines per inch, coupling that with the superfine detail. And I have 4 exposure calculators in here, placed at slightly different points on the screen. So we're going to be able to take a look at those different points on the screen where we saw a different EOM. We're going to take a look at how resolution changes throughout different pieces and coatings of the emulsion. Remember, this screen also it's inconsistent. I have some perfect coating issues with this screen, and that's fine because I want you guys to see what's going on with an imperfect screen and how that may relate to some things that you see in your shop and things that you're dealing with. I've had this screen out for a little bit. My humidity in the Ryonet darkroom is in the low 30s. What's it at? It's currently at 32. So our space is plenty dry. We can leave our screens out. Again, I really know this space. So I'm going to place this on top. I'm actually trying to find overlapping areas of the thickness or the thicker parts of my emulsion coat with images that I have here. When we go to actually spray this out, you'll see what I'm doing. Put the drawstring in, get the vacuum going. New unit, still raking it in. You can still see that I've got the dust on here. One of the things I do want to talk about with exposure units is vacuum versus compression. Vacuum is always going to give you a better seal, a better close to zero type of contact with the film into your stencil, so that when the light is hitting it, it doesn't have any chance to wrap around the edges and give you soft, fuzzy edges, which is why we always say, or anyone that has a compression lid, as heavy as you can with the weight on top of it, on top of that cushion, to give you that solid positive contact. So we're gonna go ahead and hit fast forward on this process. You're gonna watch the vacuum go down, expose, next screen come out, and I'm gonna put these into a water-only dip tank. And we'll talk about that when we get to that point. And vacuum. As you may have noticed, I didn't use any tape on any of this, so everything just naturally stuck through having no air in between it with the vacuum. So I'm just going to need to reposition. There we go. Thin thread, the one with 30% or so, a little bit higher than 30% EOM. Get that into generalized center of the image. Clamp this down. With this one, I am going to change my exposure times. With it being thin thread and the thicker EOM, my exposure times are going to be extended. But this is also yellow mesh that I have on here for the 157 thin thread, which is going to add another 30% onto that exposure time. So this is going to be a bit longer. We'll go from there. And fast forward. and exposure is done. That's a lot of films. There we go. I'm gonna go sit this in the dunk tank. I'm gonna reposition the camera. We're gonna be right back and we're gonna talk about what we see as we spray this out and how a screen is gonna look when it comes out of the dip tank and everything involved in that. All right, so let's see how this goes. I just finished the second exposure. I have it in the dunk tank. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull out that first screen that has now been sitting for about 3 minutes, maybe as much as 5 minutes. And I'm going to show it to you squeegee side, and we're going to talk about everything that you see there. And we're going to relate this to everything that we've been talking about, how your stencil behaves, the things that you're going to see and the whys and what's good and what's bad and what's, we can work with it. So I'm going to grab that screen. Boy, I tell you, aluminum screens floating around in a water-only dip tank takes a little bit to manage sometimes. So I have the screen here. Doesn't look like we could really see a whole lot with it, with the light off. So I'm going to flip the backlight on. You're not going to see me very well, but there we go. Up here is those areas that were really thick, and you can see I've got the dreaded scumming. Is that showing up? Let's see here. Now, you guys know what scumming looks like. It's the underexposed emulsion. You can see there's some lint and whatnot in my water-only dip tank. You can see things start to dissolve here and peel away on the exposure strip and in the solid areas of our image. You can see here, so those are the thicker areas. I'm going to turn this off. All right, let's see what we can actually get on camera. So you can see the thicker areas of the stencil right here, here in the corners where I got it thick. Get it into the light. There we go. It looks milky. And the reason why it's milky is because it's not fully cross-linked. It's not exposed properly. And that's exactly what we knew what was going to happen. We knew that this is going to be, those areas were going to be underexposed in relation to the main area of our stencil. So that is a good visual indicator of what an underexposed stencil looks like. We have good color integrity for the solid areas of our stencil, and the areas that were under look milky, like we added a lot of white to it. So I'm going to give, one of the things that you're going to see out of any kind of soaking, especially, is going to be every area actually has just a little bit of underexposed emulsion. We never get, unless we're deliberately overexposing, a full all the way through exposure of our stencil. So it's just a little bit, tiny amount of emulsion that's going to come off. And you're going to notice that specifically within the dip tank. If you're using any kind of water to rinse that, just missed it, that's going to actively remove that layer. So I'm going to hit this with the hose a little bit. Just to show what's, just to remove all of that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the light back on, and we're going to see that we already have quite a bit of good rinse out happening. We can see our exposure calculator is soft immediately to a number 10. Let's see over here. Looks like a number 10. Looks like number 9's coming out a little bit. These are all going to go at a slightly different rate, especially this one up here that's right on the dramatically underexposed section. And that's why I put that there, because that's going to come out to maybe a solid 5 or 6, and we're going to show what's going on there. So, there's one more thing. Oh, right. When you're spraying out your screen, we don't want to use any kind of real water pressure on this side. Remember, the emulsion is actually thinner there, and we're actively trying to create enough emulsion on top to actually hold up for durability and abrasion. But when we hit it with a pressure washer, that's then we're ever really going to see on press, and you can actually blast it out. You can blast it out from the other side too if you get too close. Remember, my pressure washer is a 1700 psi. And if I get too close, I will blow this out. In fact, I might even try that just to show you what it's going to do. I'm going to turn this on and it's going to get noisy. I'm going to get in close to this area just to demonstrate how much you can beat on it before it starts to fall apart. Getting in close can really mess it up. Distance, remember to keep your distance. And on a pressure washer, that top and bottom of the spray is always going to be a little bit stronger. So let's turn that off. So one of the things I wanted to point out is that the emulsion on top here is still, I'm messing with the top exposure calculator. The emulsion here on this side cross-linked enough that step 6 was pretty solid, but the emulsion on top of it was definitely still a little soft. So that's something that I would question for an exposure time. We can see over here on this side, this one ended up spraying out to really good solid step 7. This one over here, the 7's a little soft. And again, remember this talks about small thicknesses, 7, 10 mils in your emulsion layer. That can actually have, and it is pretty shocking the first time you really see this and understand this, that you can get that small change in your emulsion thickness from side to side if you're coating one-handed, or even if you're using a two-handed method that it's not perfectly even on either side. You can have a swing in a step 7 being soft or durable with less than a 10 millimeter thickness change in your emulsion deposit. And the only way most of us know about that right now is through what I showed you over there, how we have variance within our screen itself. But what I want to show is that on a 156 standard mesh, I was using the tabletop LED unit with the bulb tubes that you guys saw, and we're still able to keep really, really, really tight detail. So, and then I don't know if we can see it here on screen, but we can talk about mesh pattern interference and how that creates some moire. We can see here in our droplet test that we get, around 3 droplet weight started to get weird. Text over here, right around droplet weight 5 didn't really come out all the way. 6 or 7 was better. But when we were spraying it out, you could see that some of these skimmed over with a harder layer, partially solidified emulsion there. So you can see the light coming through. it was able to blast out with the pressure washer. You can even do the same thing with a good high pressure hose. But going to a heavier, denser droplet weight is always going to help. Usually on your Epson printers or HP or whatever else you're using that doesn't have a rip and we're able to manipulate the settings to get a denser laydown, you're still somewhere in this area that is functional, but it's obviously not as good as it could be. Not to mention you have to do workarounds if you're doing any kind of halftone work, that sort of thing. So we can see that getting in too close with a pressure washer, no matter how well you're exposed, can create issues. Different parts of the screen that are different stencil or different emulsion thicknesses will behave differently when it's exposed because, again, light has to travel all the way through. If you stop the light before it's traveled all the way through, it's underexposed. And having an exposure calculator in these different areas is showing that as little as 7 micron difference, you can see the difference. So I'm going to pull out the thin thread, which is the exact same, and we're going to see how that looks. All right. So, just like before, we're going to rinse the inside of this image. All right. Now remember, this was a thick stencil. This was a little bit thicker than I would normally want to run anything on. But you can see here where we were just talking about a droplet density test. I run here, 12. So 15, 14, 13, 12. This is where I run. And it's rinsing out fairly well. So 11, 10. You can see how these densities, you're getting partial exposure of your emulsion here. So up here, these are, yeah, nothing's coming through here. I might be able to blast it out, but. So let's see. Now down to, this soaked for a while. During our talk and everything else, this was soaking. So we've got super fine detail, exposure calculators in different areas, 35 LPI, 55 LPI. And what I'm going to work on after this is trying to get some really good pictures to thread in here so we can see the detail that's kept and how threads can interfere. But I'm going to go ahead and blast this out with the pressure. Actually, no. Here we go. I'm going to use the hose. We know hoses work, definitely not as good as a pressure washer. That's going to take forever for me to spray out. I'm going to pressure washer. So anybody else picking up on that? We had a lot more semi-cross-linked emulsion going on there. This was a lot thicker stencil. We're up at 30%. That's a pretty thick stencil. And with the extended exposure time, light was able to go through a little bit and give a small skim on some of these areas, especially with the designed exposure calculator. It's letting us know that we're getting light through, but we're not getting light through all the way to the other side of the stencil, and that's why we're getting it flapping around. So we're getting light exposure on the immediate contact side with the light, but it's not extending through very far. That's why it's able to flap around. The thicker your stencil, the more that can happen, which goes back to making sure you have the proper droplet density on your films and everything else involved with that. Make sure you're stopping the UV light from going through based on what you need to do. So up here we have, I'm going to turn this on so I can see it a little better. That 8 is definitely delaminated, solid step 7. Over here, my 7 rinsed out. This, I'd have to go back and check, but I know that top and bottom were a little different. Solid step 7 here. Step 7 rinsed out over here. And again, 30% EOM. Things happen with a thicker stencil. Side to side differences. Even with the thin thread. With the longer exposure times, you're still going to see a lot of the same stuff. But down here, in the details here, I'm going to take those pictures and I'm going to show you. And we've kept just about all of it in the areas where we have solid 7, soft 7, soft 7, solid 7. I'm going to have to say we're right in the general area. Oh, and then I'll take pictures over here. I'll try to take pictures over here of the shadow areas and the halftone dots and thin thread and how they behave. Anyways, geeky stuff. Hopefully this helped a lot of individuals see and understand what it is that they're dealing with. Maybe another way to help improve the processes with that you're doing and further define what's good, better, best for you and your shop. Not every shop space is going to be able to hit the perfect conditions to create the perfect stencil. And it's not so much about actually achieving and doing, it's about creating the processes, creating the checks and balances, creating the steps to get to as good as you can within the space that you have. I understand that not everyone can create that space. You're limited. Sometimes it's financially, sometimes it's just space and environment. Sometimes, you're trying to do something at home and you got kids running around, or you've got whatever. We can all come up with scenarios where it's suboptimal conditions. But it's always about striving to be the best that you can be, to do the best that you can do, and everything else. Hi, I'm here. I know my stuff. I would love to be able to help you create a better environment for yourself and your shop. Talk to us. We'll help you out and we'll get you into a better place. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you guys later.